I think the way we'll take this up is I'll just read the paragraph. I'll read the paragraph and then I'll get the team or two in some cases to sort of give me your feedback, and then I'll build a little bit on it with the flip chart. Did you find that somewhat interesting, even just on a personal note? Yeah, it is. There's more to it than meets the eye. No, I was certainly surprised. I sort of look at them a little bit differently now than I used to, somewhat more favorably, I think, after that. So, anyways, so number one. First one was, scientists have learned that as each bird flaps its wings, it creates an uplift for the bird immediately following. By flying in a V formation, the flock adds at least 71% greater flying speed than if each bird flew alone. So who had number one? You had it over here and you had it over here. So we had two groups on this one. I'm just going to do a very scribbly, this is my advanced degree in graphic arts. There, this is my geese. Let me start over here, and then I'll get you to tag into that. So what was your perspective on that first one?
We thought that team members building off other people's experience, and you don't have to invent the wheel every time. You keep going forward rather than having to do all the work yourself every time.
Right. So experience becoming a critical kind of part to this. Okay. Anything to add to that? Because again, you can look at this in different ways. Let me go to this group for a moment.
We said about support and working together. We're more or less saying the same thing.
Right.
It leads to a common goal where you're going.
Right. So support and working together. Okay. Is there anything else over here, or?
Yeah, and with that support, it helps in your learning and your growth, and you can move on.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, when you think about it, and you just think about this whole premise of a flock, in this case of geese, sort of moving towards. They obviously must have, and I don't know how they articulate it, obviously, but I'll go back to Ken's point a little bit earlier. They obviously must have some sort of intuitive, but very well-defined what? Goal or purpose or destination, call it what you want, right? And that's the only way that you can really get that lineup. I mean, you think about it. If you think about Canadian geese, you think about this part of the world, you know, certainly back in October, November, when it started to get a little cool, December when it got really nasty, they obviously have a goal at that point, the Canadian geese up here, which are to what? Leave, right? Not a bad goal, actually. And specifically to go where? South, right? And you know, so if you take this analogy and have a little bit of fun with it, you know, if this goose here is, or if the team leader declares, okay, we're going to Florida this year, okay? Well, that's good. That's direction. That's goal. But is it specific enough? Maybe not really, because Florida to this goose, who has older geese parents, might be in Fort Myers. And this one, though, that has young, is it goslings? I don't even know. What are baby geese? Yeah. Yep. Maybe wants to go to Orlando. And this one that has, you know, university kids wants to go to Fort Lauderdale. You see where I'm going. They'd get to Florida, but they'd be all going a little bit differently, which would effectively do what to their efficiency? Decrease it, right? Because it's not a straight line, so to speak. It's a little bit wobbly all the way. Now again, it's a silly analogy, I realize, from that perspective. But you see the importance of not only having that goal and that purpose, but this has got to be articulated between team members as well as from team leader, right, the team members. And again, I go back to Ken's point earlier. If the team leader doesn't know this, you can sure the heck guarantee that the rest of the people don't know this, so they don't know really what to follow. They're going to follow, but if this is a little bit off to begin with, you're going to have a whole set of geese going in all sorts of interesting directions and not maybe where they should be going. Plus, you're just not going to get those effectiveness, or those efficiencies. And if anyone's done any little bit of cycling at all, I used to, back in my younger days, I used to do a lot of triathlons, and I used to cycle with local bike clubs and stuff like that. And I remember the first time, I used to cycle train by myself. And the first time I went with a group of people, where you did basically, you know, 15 or 20 riders in a row, you know, down the side of the road. I'm sure you see that in the country roads around. The first time I did that, I couldn't believe it, that we could go so far with so much less energy and so much quicker. Because obviously you were drafting off of each person. And each person would, you know, take their turn and go to the back of the line. Lots of communication going on all the time, back and forth, you know, gravel on the left, roadkill on the right, you know, tractor trailer up ahead, all sorts of communication. But the important thing was, is when you were done, you're going, wow, quicker, more efficient, and a lot less energy expended. And that, to me, was a really nice way of demonstrating a team principle from a more biological or physiological way that you can bring this back to the workplace, right? By making sure that everyone is on the same page and you've got that purpose. And I go back to the comment that I made earlier. The team leader doesn't know they've got to do everything in their power to get clarity from above. And if the team members don't know, you have to do everything in your power to get the clarity from the team leader. But you just have to do that if you're going to try to get anywhere near these efficiencies, which is challenging to do, I realize. Good stuff. Put that scribbly diagram on.
I also said
Yeah.
that all require trust.
Right.
So when you said dig deeper, and that's what we come up with, that that obviously good communication.
Right.
It's one, and then trust.
Right. And as we'll talk about when we get into that specific area of trust, trust is one of those sort of challenging things within a team that, you just can't mandate trust, okay? You will trust me. No, it's accumulation of what? Trust is a culmination of what?
Well, you build it over time.
Experience with each other, and it comes over time, right? So again, I'm going to show you some graphs. Trust kind of goes like this in a team if you're doing the right stuff. But very quickly, if there is a perceived or a real trust-breaking event, how does that go? And it doesn't do the nice mountainy kind of thing. It drops off a cliff right away, and it takes that much longer to build back up. But we'll talk about that. You're right. But that is a condition that it gets built in time. Awesome. Number 2, a goose falls out of formation, presumably to look for more favorable flying conditions. The rest of the formation provides encouragement by leaving a space in the formation open. If more favorable conditions are found, the flock reforms around the loner. If more favorable conditions are not found, the flock slows its pace to allow the loner back into position. Lots of stuff in that one. It's probably due for another diagram. Who had number 2? I think just one had that. Great. What was your perspective on that group number 2?
Well, we saw it as a bit of the team and the group accepting risks and allowing an opportunity for risk-taking to happen, or looking for opportunities. But the person or whoever goes in that direction is taking a risk to do that. They're expending the energy, they're carrying the burden. It may or may not work.
Right.
So the team has to be prepared to be able to provide a safe landing for that person when it doesn't work out.
Right.
So you have to be able to bring them back in, give them the encouragement, and provide a space so that they can come back into it. But also, it talks to the team to be able to recognize that there's another way. There's an opportunity maybe out there somewhere, so that when somebody finds it, it's communicated and accepted, and the team gravitates to that opportunity. So there's the risk-taking, the opportunities, the flexibility, the communication, and but also not being rigid, so that we're stuck on this path. No, let's go over here. They're better. So having that flexibility, the opportunity, looking forward, looking outwards.
Right. No, well said. And again, I think a critical part is that the creativity and the risk-taking portion of that, especially. And again, if I can just build on what you said, Ken, but it's spot on. It really is. If you've got a goose here, and this goose here says, you know what, there's a better way to do this. I think there's a better way to do this. What we're trying to say is, as a team leader and as the team members, we're saying, go check it out, do some research, bring it back to us. If you can make a business case for it when you bring it back to say, this is really going to work, as a team and as a team leader, we're flexible enough that we'll change our flight pattern to accommodate that. It makes a lot of sense. Also, which I think is critical, is when you have a situation where this person, or goose in this case, comes back and can't sell the team on it. Doesn't have the validation, doesn't have the research, doesn't make any sense. How we deal with that individual, both as a team leader and as team members, is fairly critical. Wouldn't you agree? Mm-hmm. Because how we deal with that person's input is directly proportionate to how much input that person or the rest of the team are ever going to give us ever again. I.e., if this person comes back in and we look at this person and say, what cloud were you on when you came up with that crazy idea? And that's just ridiculous. Like, where have you been for the last month? This person says, whoa, okay, fine. Apparently creativity is not important around here. I'm not going to say anything. And all the rest of the people say, heck with that. I'm not going to say anything either. And so what you've in essence done in one meeting per se, with maybe a few ill-intended comments, you've blown that trust, go back to your point earlier, Margaret, you've blown that trust clean right out the door. And if you want creativity in that team and lateral thinking and all that good fun stuff that we try to promote, it's gone. Right? It's gone. So I think that's fairly important of how we deal with that as a team leader and as team members. Because peers can be just as brutal as a team leader. And I'm sure you've had experience with that at times. Sometimes more so. Sometimes more so with their feedback. Anything else? There's one other point I want to add, but I just want to throw it if that sparked any other thoughts or...
Well, in general, as a whole
Yeah.
team, it allows for innovation.
Well, it sure does.
You know.
It sure does.
And that's the creativity part.
Exactly. And what we have to recognize for those that are team members in the room, that, everyone can't be out on a special research project, in all fairness, because if you have too many people out doing this, what happens to the overall movement towards the goal? It doesn't, right? So again, this is a challenge. So as a team leader, we have to try to manage this, but as a team member, we have to be somewhat understanding of the fact that, hey, I've got some ideas too, but maybe now is not the time to go after this. We've already got a bunch of other people out working this. So we have to recognize and respect that as well, because we still need forward movement towards that goal. So it's a balance, and it's not an easy balance. No one said this team stuff was easy. Hence the reason why we have courses on it, right? No one said it was easy. Good stuff. Yeah, that one, I think that was got a lot of meat to that one, that number 2 especially. Number 3, let's move on. On occasion, a loner stays out of the formation and makes no effort to return to the flock. The flock closes rank, continues flying its course. The loner either tires from the drag and resistance of trying to go alone, tags onto the end of the V, or will be lost to the flock completely. With number 3? Okay, so what was your perspective on number 3?
We found this one really hard because our initial response was always, try and work with the loner, try and get them back from the team.
Right.
It's like that's not what this paragraph is dealing with.
Okay.
So then we started talking about situations where there is somebody who's not doing their work, who's not participating in the team, and how do you deal with that in a union environment? You
Right.
usually can't just fire them.
Right.
So in our experience, that person usually gets sort of shuffled to the back of the V formation, given easy tasks without a lot of responsibility, just sort of,
Right.
they won't leave, but they're not really part of the team anymore.
Right.
But
Right.
we don't know how to make them an effective part of the team. All we can do is sort of shuffle
Right.
them to where they do the least damage.
Right, right, and I hate to say, unfortunately, in some cases, that is a strategy that one has to take. I'm not saying that's the optimal strategy. I'm not saying it's the one that we want to take, but sometimes when everything else is being tried, that becomes a fallback position. And again, it's not something that I like to work with personally, but the reality is in some environments that's what happens. But you are right in terms of the dynamics of that is that you will get, if we take our second paragraph where this person was out because of positive reasons, really what this is saying is this person's out because for whatever reason and not positive. They don't want to be part of the team, they're not motivated. In all fairness, maybe they've got things going on in their life, once again, that doesn't allow them to be motivated, so it doesn't always have to be negative. But at the end of the day, they're not pulling their weight for some reason, whether valid or not, right? And you're right, the goal is, certainly the first level of working with that is, usually from a team leader perspective, is that's your role of trying to coach, counsel, work with, job fit, all that good stuff. The reality, though, sometimes is when that doesn't work, like you said, what happens is they sort of become marginalized within the team. The rest of the people, create cliques, groups, sub-teams, whatever you want to call it, and that person sort of gets left to do their own thing, which in some ways can be seen as a reward to them, depending on the way you look at this. Now, I'm not saying that is a great situation. That is where, usually a situation like that, either one of two things happens. One is that eventually the pressure becomes too challenging for this person to deal with that, and they eventually leave the flock on their own volition, or, unfortunately, what happens in a lot of cases, it's left to fester for a long time, and people get upset and they just deal with it in their own way, which is not a real positive way either. unfortunate situation, the role should be, the team leader should be working fairly assertively with that person to, find that area that works for them. And sometimes, let's face it, as a worst case scenario, but sometimes it's the best for everyone, including the person there. They are asked to go and expand their flying horizons. Is that a nice way of saying it? Yeah. Politically correct? Yeah. Oh, good. But I'm not saying that is the way we always go with this. But sometimes, I know enough people. When I worked for the Ontario government for close to 10 years before I moved out here, I was in a position, it was within the college system, but it was a Ontario government position where you're just housed in the college environment. It's a sort of a skills training area. And I know eventually we got to a situation where we had a couple folks that were in that role, that they were demotivated, did not want to be there anymore, and they really did everything in their power to do as little as they could. And eventually what happened was the manager took this seriously, worked with them, but eventually that's what happened. They left, and not by their own accord. And I kept in contact with both of them for a little while, and they said, you know what, in retrospect, it was the best thing that could have ever happened. I was not happy there. Nothing that can be done in that area would make me happy. It was better for me. And if you would have asked them a month afterwards, they wouldn't have said that. 6 months after, they said it was the best thing that ever happened. So it's one of those sometimes short-term pain for long-term gain for both parties. But I do know, you guys, you know what is better as well, not better than I do. If that is left to sit for a long period of time when it's not being dealt with, or it's perceived as not being dealt with, that is poisonous in a team. It really is, and it's tough. I've been a manager in a strong unionized environment as well, and you can have great environments, but that can also make it challenging sometimes for folks to deal with that issue, if that's the way people choose to look at it. And so, again, I appreciate the challenge behind it, but it really is one of those things that as a team leader, you need to be working with positively to begin with, and then potentially going through the progressive discipline process if it's at the point where it is a performance deficiency, right? If it's a performance deficiency in some way. And the challenge always is determining what that is. But you're right, that has a huge impact on team dynamics one way or another. Number 4. Like I said, we're going to get into a couple of the, I say fixes. There's not easy fixes, but we do get into, as I said, as we go through the day, some ways to hopefully help work through some of this stuff or prevent it before it starts to occur is a better case. Okay, let's go to something a little bit more lighthearted. Number 4. The lead goose gets tired, it rotates back into the flock, and the other goose takes over the point position. Number 4. Yeah. Okay. So what was your take on number 4?
Oh, we were saying about sharing the leadership, and the head goose isn't threatened by the other other geese in his team.
Right.
And so he can let somebody take over the front part.
Right.
And not all team leaders want to do that.
Right.
Once they're a team leader, they're a team leader, and they don't want to do anything else.
Right. And you're right, and that is the biggest challenge sometimes is, how a team leader defines him or herself. And if the team leader defines him or herself as, I am the leader of this team in the traditional way, in the more the autocratic way, that I have to now do all of the leading all of the time, that makes it challenging for people around them, or the team members around them, to build their skill sets and competencies to be able to move up or move horizontally in an organization. And again, the best team leaders that I've worked with, certainly, if I've got, and let's say Christy you're one of my team members, and I know that you're my best person at dealing with irate clients. I'm just going to...
Actually, I am.
There you go. We all see here. That's right. And so I'm having a meeting. I'm running a team meeting once a month, once every 3 weeks. And on the agenda this week was, how to deal with some of those real challenging clients. Why would I not use Christy's skills as part of that discussion? It doesn't have to mean me standing up and saying, guys, now here's how you deal with irate clients. I would probably defer it. I'd let Christy know beforehand that I'm going to ask her to do this, so it's not a surprise, of course. I'd say, Christy, you know what? You had a couple of really good experiences last week where you dealt with that client X and client Y. You know what? At our meeting today, can I just get you to sort of share kind of some of the things you did with us? Because your peers are going to really benefit from that. Now, that's a lot different than me saying, okay, guys, here's how we have to deal with irate clients. So stand up at our meeting as a team leader. Why not use the strengths of the group? Let her lead that portion of the meeting. That's just one example. I mean, there's lots of different examples you could use. But to me, that is a great way, A, to share the leadership, and B, I go back again to Margaret's point, try to build trust. Right? Because now they see, okay, you know what? Tony doesn't need all the glory on this stuff. Well, he trusts me well enough that I can lead that part of the meeting confidently by myself. That's kind of neat. Thank you. So it does build the trust as well.
Another thing from sharing your leadership, what I have found in our team, and I was explaining to my team members here, that I'm in a very lucky situation where we have sort of chosen our team leader out of all
Right.
of us, because we have worked with each other for 8 years, was that really stepping into her role, even if it's for a month or 2 months, not only exposes me to sort of her, I'm in her shoes for the 2 months, and I am understanding her limitations, then going back to being a line worker.
Right.
I have a better sort of view of what she's coming from.
Absolutely.
She's bringing things from the management, and she's saying, see guys, this is the new change, this is how it's going to be. So I think you really are expanding people's understanding of what's going on beyond just your team. And that's what the smart team leader will do, is have other people sort of step into her or his role to sort of experience that.
Right. No, it's well said. And again, if I can tag on to that, if you look at traditional sort of leadership kind of theories, I don't want to go too far into this, but if you look at it, I mean, if you've got a team leader, who looks at that in a very traditional way of leading, like I am the leader and I'm leading this, then they look at his leadership as it's kind of a fixed pie, right? Here's the pie, and therefore if all of a sudden I give now Christy, she's going to run this meeting for the next while, what that traditional leader says, okay, I've just given a piece of the pie to her, which means there's less of the pie for me. I don't like that. So guess what? I want all the pie for myself because I'm a greedy, pie-hungry guy. I'm not going to give that. Whereas, once again, a more enlightened type of team leader who sees the value of that says, we've got 5 people here with their own pieces of the pie. If I can somehow get this all working together, we get this a lot bigger pie to begin with. So if I give away a piece of that pie, who cares? Because there's a ton out there. Now, I know that's a philosophy, that's a very simple way of looking at it, but it's so true. It's so true. And it goes back to leadership philosophy and team philosophy and all that good stuff. And again, you look at for the most part, the teams and the team leaders that are very successful, as a general rule, they take this approach. This is the way their mindset is. And that doesn't mean that as a team leader you don't make decisions. It doesn't mean that you don't make decisions that are unpopular sometimes. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means you engage people in things that are important to engage people in, to help you and them make a decision collectively. And again, when we get into the problem-solving model this afternoon, you'll see a great way to be able to do that as a team, where you all have input, you all have ideas. The team leader, the facilitator, will probably still lead that discussion, but everyone would have a piece of that pie, at least conceptually speaking. So again, a little bit kind of off the beaten track, but I think important nevertheless. Okay. Getting down to the end, then we'll take a break. Number 5, the geese hop from behind to encourage those up front. Kind of a neat thing. I know when I first read that, I thought that was kind of cool. Who had number 5? Yeah, what did you have, Ken?
A couple of things came to mind is, well, as part of the team, there's those who are honking from behind to keep the people in front, or people around accountable. Hey, come on, speed up, let's go. We're okay here. You guys got to keep moving too. A little bit of that, but we also saw it more as the fact that when a person's leading from up front and they're carrying the burden and the risk and doing all the work, that's a tiring and lonely place to be. So you've got people behind you, so the team members saying, hey, we're giving you the encouragement, we're here. You're doing a good job. Keep it up.
For sure.
Good work.
For sure. And we know, I mean, we all know, and we've all read the studies, we've all been in work long enough and in business or in government or environments we've seen this, that at the end of the day, people still need to know they've done a decent job at the end of the day. Now, some people need that stroking a lot more frequently and a lot louder. Other people just need a, hey, you know what, great job, keep it up once a year and they're good. Other people get it intrinsically. Other people get it extrinsically. So you look at motivation and the studies thereof, it's still, I mean, they've done studies, Harvard Research Review and stuff, they've done this for years. And at the end of the day, the number one or number two thing that comes back in job satisfaction / motivation is recognition for a job well done in some form or another. Some people are stronger than others, guaranteed. As a general rule, that's important. Now, if we look at this in terms of the geese honk from behind, so what we're talking about here is not necessarily the team leader honking, right? We know that. We know that managers and team leaders are supposed to honk. It's in their management course. Honk. Every once in a while, honk. Honk, damn it. I mean, they're told to. So when it comes from the manager, it's great, especially a lack of none. But you know what? Where the real strength of the honking comes from, I think you know where I'm going with this, is from home. Yeah, it's from the co-workers, right? It's from your peers. It's from your team. That is the, and why, let's just think of the psychology of that for a moment. Why is that really in some way stronger than that of that type of honking from a manager or a leader? Why? When you think about it a little deeper, why is that more, not valuable, but has more oomph?
Because they come from the position of understanding. They're one of your colleagues and from this, exactly from the same place. They know what you're going through more than, management.
And they don't have to.
They're in it with you.
Right, and they don't have to do it.
Yeah.
They do it because they want to do it, not because they've been told to do it. And again, I'm not giving the managers and the supervisors and the leaders here a hard time in the class, far from it, because I do that in a lot of roles. But you think about it, it's expected from the managers and leaders. It's expected. They don't always get it, but it's expected. When it comes from a peer, no one says you have to give your coworker a pat on the back. And the most glaring example of this for me recently was with, again, my son, 11 years old, plays house league. He's been with the same bunch of guys pretty much now for the last 2 or 3 years. And it's funny, myself and the other coach, up until this year especially, we still do it a little bit, it's always us doing the motivation as the coach. Way to go, boys, keep it up, great shift, all the stuff that hockey coaches do. They expect it, the kids, they expect it. This year is the first year, they're finally at that age where we start to see them coming to the bench after a shift and say, hey, Blake, that was a great pass, that was awesome, or Bill, nice shot, or way to take that guy. They're giving, and they're going, yeah, and they're high-fiving. We have nothing to do with it. They're giving it to each other. We're not touching it. We're not even touching it. And to me, that was a real kind of revelation, like, wow. And you can just see, they expect the coaches to say, good shift, way to go, great, because that's what we do. I say that's what we're paid for. No, we're not paid for as a volunteer coach. But for them, it's coming from the heart. They truly believe it. They're out in the what's the word I'm looking for? Well, they're out with the troops, out in the real world, in this case, and they're giving each other feedback. And you can see the value that that has. To me it says something, because what it does is the motivation, if you're hoping that motivation is going to go in this level, let's face it, there are days that we're really motivated, days that we're not so motivated, days that we're really motivated, days that we're not so motivated. And over a period of a year, you have these peaks and valleys. As far as both managerial honking, to use that term, and peer honking, when do you think is the most important time that occurs? It's down here, right? So that's the other point I wanted to make with this, is not only is it critical, and hopefully you can build it in, that the peers give feedback and honk with each other, but it's especially important down here, right? Which is where it's most difficult, right? Which is where it's most difficult. It's one thing to honk when we're all, riding a high, but again, I've worked with a bunch of businesses in the last 6 months. A lot less work in the last 6 months than I'm used to be perfectly honest, due to this economic climate. And I can tell you, nearly every client I work with in the private sector right now, when I deal with them, they're all down here. And you can see the struggle emotionally people are going through, just trying to work through this whole economic situation that's gripped the world right now, without trying to belabor that. Whether it's media made or it's real or whatever it is, people are feeling it. And I'm finding this is a real challenge for people right now. Certainly private sector related stuff I'm dealing with, is people are down here. And it's tough to pull people back up right now. But this is, to me, is the true mettle of the team and the team leaders when you're down here. Not as much when you're up here. That's my own personal perspective, at least anyways. Last but not least, and then I will take a break, I promise. Finally, when a goose gets sick or is wounded and falls out, 2 other geese fall out to follow and protect. They stay with the stricken goose until it recovers or can no longer continue. They then launch out on their own or with another formation to catch up with the flock. That one I always kind of call it, it's kind of like the the motherhood and apple pie statement. It just kind of brings it all together. And it's the closest thing to the group hug we'll find all day, I promise. But what does that generally mean, all joking aside?
Compassion.
Compassion for each other as a team, okay?
Support.
Support,
Understanding.
okay? Yep.
Standing up for the team or taking on for the team.
Yep. And it's funny, I find that most people are pretty good at helping out if someone is not well, they're going through family issues or whatever it might be. Most people are pretty good to rally around the troops, so to speak, and kind of help out. What I find, though, is it's when it starts to become one-sided, when it's the same person all the time, and you're, to use a term that my mother would use, you're dipping into the well too often and without replacing. That's when I think people then trying to have issues in teams. And I find for the most part, most people are pretty good. Most teams that I work with are pretty good at that whole kind of mutual respect, reciprocity type of thing. I don't mind giving and taking as long as there's somewhat of a balance at the end of the time. It's when there's too much taking and enough giving is when people then start to get a little bit upset and the teams can become, well, to the point of very dysfunctional if it's taking too much. So, good stuff. Just to finish off, this again, you've got your own notes, but if you wanted to capture them, sort of what I think are the 5 key things that we took away from those, or 6 key things that we took away from the geese. That first one, it goes back again to Ken's point that he made earlier, and I sort of built on that a little bit, was that importance of the articulate, well-communicated, the common goals. I'll leave this up for those that are writing it down. You don't need to, but I'll leave it up for you. There's that second one, which we talked about, the balance of flexibility and movement towards the goals, plus how we acknowledge the input. That was the one, remember, when people went out and they came back in, if their ideas were good, how we would deal with it. If their ideas were not so positive, how would we deal with it as well? We talked about in the third one, the role of coaching, and especially those that have performance or fit, as we sometimes call it, issues. We didn't use that term delegate, but that was the situation that I spoke of when I mentioned, if Christy was my best person with dealing with irate customers, why not delegate or let her take that on in a meeting? The last one was our honking. I'll just leave it at that. We all remember what the honking was. Feedback and encouragement from both the leaders and the peers. And the last one was that important, we didn't talk too much about the importance of helping and reciprocity, do unto others and all that good stuff. And again, you look at really strong teams, just take this in from very much a business perspective for a moment, very strong teams that are effective, you will see these 6 especially, many more, but you'll see these 6 competencies really stand out in those teams. They are definitely underpinnings of effective teams in most cases. There's always exceptions to every rule, of course.